In this map of love, I'm going to talk about everything I know about love, or at least what occurs to me today, and also a little bit about what love isn't. And let's start with what love is not. I think one of the most important things to understand is that language is symbolic. So we invent mouth noises to create greater efficiency. Because if I want to point out what a tree is, and I have to get out of the house, wait till dawn, run over to a tree and say tree, or just point and not say anything, and then if I want to show where Canada is, get on a plane, show someone Canada and point and hope they understand that I mean Canada and not the bit of rock I'm pointing to. That's a lot of work. And so language, like many things, is symbolic. It is a representation, which is to say that the sound or the word love is not love. It is a representation. And the biggest con game in the book is to change the language, which is why it's so popular among politicians. And so in a lot of the pain and reason love is such a dirty word is that we've had this con game played on us. Our parents beat us or lied to us or told us to do some rotten thing that we didn't want to do and, that was expedient. And they could have said we're being rotten assholes, but that wouldn't have looked very good. And so you get a lot of short-term mileage off the idea of reversing things and saying, oh, no, that's not abuse, that's not laziness, that's not inconsistency, lack of integrity, short-sightedness, ignorance, stupidity. No, it's none of that. It's love, or something similar for your own good. And this is why love has such a bad word. You can literally, in many Western countries, such as the United States, be getting to know someone, and if you say, I love you, they will respond as if you've just bit them with a poisonous snake, sometimes ending the relationship, because they are so terrified about what those sounds have been correlated to. And this is how we build up language. In other words, love is a symbol. Let's just use L. And then every single thing that's happened to us or that we've seen or seen happen to other people that's correlated with that word is the sometimes contradictory and often bizarre program inside that is associated with the meaning of the word. And so, and it's not always directly, because sometimes you have 10 different people who you have some respect for saying, your parents love you. And then you look at what your parents are doing, and they're doing a bunch of things that you can't stand. And so it's like, okay, that all that, I don't want love, And then you tell some girl when you're 10 years old that you love her, or she says that to you, and now everyone teases you, and you don't want to be teased, so get the fuck out of here. And then someone has sex with you and opens up all these feelings, and then abandons you and called that making love. And it's like, I didn't like that at all. And then someone who says they love you runs off with their best friend, and it's like, I don't want that. And so all of these painful associations and all of these confusing associations, or this is love when I do it, it's abuse when you do it, and all of this stuff gets labeled around the world, the word, and it's why love has such a bad rap. And so all love is a sound, just like any other sound, not better or worse than potato, joy, magic, wisdom, celery. It's just a sound. And so, like most of the most important things in life, we do not get an education on what love is. And it's really bizarre when you look at just how much we don't learn of useful things in school. What's the purpose of life? What is God? You have this word thrown around, and it's not worth a single hour in the entire parenting or education curriculum to sit down and get some consensus of what it means. Because one of the reasons it's valuable to do this is so that you can push back and say, no, that's not love. By the definition, love is this. So let's dive in, and so love is not, being hit. It's not being hated. It's not being sexually abused. It's not being lied to. It's not being, pushed and guilt-tripped into doing a variety of things you can't stand doing, or being shamed and, asked to do things you cannot do. That's not love. And, whatever those are, that's not love. So let's look at some of the things love could be, and, what love is for me. So one of the things that we can first see in broad terms is that love happens at different dimensions. And one of those dimensions is, or the set of dimensions is physical, emotional, mental. And one way to look at these is as different octaves of energy. That things start as thoughts, then we have feelings about the thoughts, and then we take action as our thoughts and feelings synthesize. And so you have these different dimensions of love. You can love someone as a thought, send an email, a postcard, etc., that communicates a thought of value, a thought of encouragement. One good way that I like that Jordan Peterson says is, a definition of a good friend is that a good friend wants the best for the best part in you. And so the thought that advocates the best for the best part in you, for example, eat good, healthy food, be mindful of this, take your medicine. You could say that these are, loving thoughts. And that feelings, caring, empathy, compassion, caring for the best part in the other, and wishing and hoping, and, if you will, praying for the best part, for the best in the best part of the other, that this is a form of love. And then you have physical love, which has two distinctions. You've got the physical love, which is to touch another person's body in such a way that you connect, bringing well-being, bringing joy, bringing pleasure, bringing healing. That this is a form of love. You have another version of this mental, emotional, physical distinction, or version of these three dimensions, of loving in these three dimensions, and that is around resonance. If you ever sing together with someone and you get into the exact same resonance of the other, there's a certain third energy, a certain joy and presence when you're both singing the same song in the same tone, and there's a resonance. And it's the kind of love, or a face of love, that might be called joy in the presence. And this also has mental, emotional, physical octaves, meaning that when you're on the same wavelength of an idea, this is one of the things that, if you read the biography of Hewlett and Packard, or the founders of the Sony Corporation, as an example, it was particularly touching. If you read the book Sony, the two founders knew each other's thoughts so well that they could complete each other's sentences. Often they didn't need to open their mouth. And there was a love between those two men that seemed to transcend everything, an attunement. And so you have this mental attunement of knowing and being known, of respecting, of responding, of attunement, of believing in, of valuing, and of resonating, flowing, a certain kind of harmony and flow without resistance. And so that is an experience of a certain kind of mental love, the love in the paradigm of attunement or resonance. And similarly, emotionally, you can look in someone's face, you can look in their eyes, and you can start to feel and experience a heart opening, where you can feel the other person's heart, and you can see it in their eyes. The face makes a certain set of expressions. The voice resonates in a certain sound, and you can hear it in the other person's voice. And you realize they're feeling it too. One person can feel it, but when you share love on an emotional level in the paradigm of joy in the presence, it's that emotional level of connecting. And the same is true at a deeper octave in the physical sense of making love, where the touch. I remember an experience where I had just met a woman who was traveling, and we spent 4 days together in relative silence and in a state of a deep and transcendent energy. And every touch on our bodies were like a Rubik's Cube. They were like mathematical doorways. And it was so interesting, the multidimensional flows that opened up, that genital stimulation was minimal, meaning it almost felt like a distraction from what was being held in the space, and it was released in touch. I've never felt anything like it. It was like at least a 400% magnification of the senses. I only felt it with her. One time, one woman, gone. But we did that for 4 days. And anytime we articulated, we were on the same page. So it was kind of a connection of heart, mind, and body. And it's worth noting that while these are distinct for mental purposes, that at a deeper level, they're all connected. You can't have a thought without producing a feeling. You can't have a feeling that doesn't change the body. You can't change the body without producing a thought. It's there's a very tight connection because every thought registers in the biology of the brain. So they're interconnected. A good way to look at them is like sound octaves. The mental is the highest octave, then the emotional, then the physical. The physical is the densest also. And so the physical has the most impact. If you say, I love you, and punch you in the face, first of all, it's not the kind of thing you generally do if you mean it, but if you do, the fist is going to have more impact than the words because it's denser. The body has the most density. And so it's a good place to start. And it's, I think, also one of the reasons why we're so obsessed with sex is the density of orgasm is one of the ways to break through the crud of the cultural defense mechanism that blocks off heart and mental connections. We do not learn relationship technology in education, and so we don't know how to harmonize and resonate just as a result of going to school or watching our parents arguing. And so being able to find that flow in the body can sometimes break it through at the upper levels to realize, wow, something really important is happening. I don't know what it is because I haven't been taught to think. I don't know what I'm feeling because I've been taught I'm a guy and I don't have feelings. But something's there. And so, and the body through its density is helping to shift the heart and the mind, which is one of the reasons why people are often most intelligent right after orgasm, meaning it's very intelligent to have committed, stable relationships. It's very intelligent to be empathetic, to care about another person, to be honest, to be vulnerable. It's incredibly intelligent. And while the orgasm and chemicals are running, people say intelligent things, and then they get back into the acculturated brain system, and then they back away from intelligent. Because if there's one thing that seems synonymous with our culture, intelligence doesn't come to mind, at least for me. So this is one facet of love. Mental, emotional, physical love as something to bring out the best in the other and this can be a mature discipline kind of love, and also this just resonance love. You can have an incredibly immature, unconscious individual who just resonates on just that frequency, and there's a mutual joy that may or may not be articulatable by either person. There's also the faces of love, which we'll get to a little bit. There's roles in which love occurs. There's the paradigm and dimension of the psyche. There's something interesting about the human brain and about human beings, because in the way that we're looking at love here, animals have, at best maybe 20% of the capacity to love compared to humans. And this is an interesting distinction because, for example, many dogs are more loving and nurturing than many human beings. But that's not because human beings don't have the capacity to be, 80% more loving. It's because they're not doing it. Meaning the body, the brain, the technology is there. We could be spending 2 hours a day in our education program, learning the art of loving and sustainable relationships. Suddenly school would be 5 times more interesting. Suddenly you wouldn't have sulking teenagers. Suddenly you'd have a country that actually knew how to relate to each other. Ethics would improve, life would be more interesting, marriages would last longer, sex would be more satisfying, could be great. But that would require intelligence, which, as I mentioned, is not synonymous with culture. So within the human brain, we have an enormous capacity to love. And one of the reasons I say it's like 4 times more than an animal is, for example, language. It's hard to have mental love with a dog. So we make it up. A dog says, "Oh, oh," and we say, "Oh, you love me so much." And I think this is why, one of the reasons dogs, for example, are so healing is we get to make up whatever it is that we most need to hear or are willing to receive. And dogs are relationally and emotionally more healthy than most of us, because we don't because I guess we've recognized that their brains are not sophisticated enough to be brainwashed. And so we don't demand the kind of absurd behavior of our dogs that we demand of other human beings. We don't demand that they lie. We don't demand that they do all these things they hate doing. We don't demand that they sit bored in class and go off and destroy the environment or any number of things that we insist on us doing. We don't insist on our dogs doing. And so, in part because of that, they are healthier. And it's one of the reasons, we love them. Dogs don't. Well, there's I won't go into that, but so dogs in many ways are healthier companions than uneducated humans, but they don't have the full capacity. I mean, you can't have a tantric orgasm with a dog. You can't chant and eye gaze to quite the same degree. You can't experience the full body orgasm from the perfect touch and all that. And you certainly can't read a book and cry about it and all that. So there's some limitations. So the operating system is a little bit more limited, but it's also what's there is generally healthier than the acculturated brain. And there's another important part about the human brain, and this ties in with dogs as well, and it relates to the fact that one way to look at the insemination and birth process of a human being is in a 9-month replication of the entire evolution of the planet, from the little amoebas and slime, going into, developing the fish and water presence and the serpent and, coming out, going on to dry land, and, being very crude consciousness and learning language and stuff. So you can watch, to a certain extent, over the first year of a child, hundreds of millions of years of history. And we have what's called the reptilian brainstem, which relates to the brainstem of reptiles hundreds of millions of years ago. And the programs that kept reptiles alive, because reptiles don't have emotion, for example. They don't have thoughts. what they have is pattern instincts, and it's a fight, flight, freeze dynamic in a kill or be killed dynamic. So there's not a lot of empathy amongst crocodiles. You can train them through fear, for example, to always run or freeze, but you can't train a crocodile to love. And the reason this is important to understand is that it's good to look at a human brain like a series of platforms, that you have kind of a root boot program that's designed to keep the body alive. That's the fight, flight, freeze trauma system. And then you have the limbic brain that's just raw emotion that isn't particularly regulated. And then you have the conscious brain starting to come on, and then you have things like the future dreaming brain, and you have the transcendent brain, that part of the brain that releases these transcendent experiences of oneness and connection. Now, when you are traumatized and the trauma is not repaired, that is a signal to the reptilian brain to come online and run the show, because that's what it's there for. Fight, flight, freeze in a hostile environment. When you have been traumatized, it means that there's a threat to your existence, and if it wasn't repaired, it means that you're in an unsafe environment. It may be unsafe due to stupidity. It may be unsafe due to hostility. Either way, if it's not repaired, by definition, you don't have safe people anywhere around. You're not safe because you would have repaired it. Your partner isn't safe because they would have repaired it. Your parents wouldn't have caused it. So when you have an unrepaired trauma, the accurate message is that you are in an unsafe environment that doesn't know how to repair trauma, which is a good signal to engage the sociopathic fight, flight, freeze programs. So when those are engaged, and what I'm saying is that any traumatized mammal, human being, cannot love. They can respond in a way that other people may or may not find pleasurable out of fear, but that's very different than responding out of love. Like, you can train a tiger to do what you want, but with fear of flame and with reward of treat, but you're not building, a conscious, loving relationship, because that part of the brain can't deal with it. You can build a trustworthy relationship where you're always afraid of this, and you've had enough pain and positive stuff happening with this and this that you will do that yourself. But that's different than saying, I could easily eat you and destroy you, but I care about you. So there's a connection in the human brain, and it's one of the reasons why it's so critical as a culture that we deal with trauma, because it is literally impossible to love or receive love when you are in trauma. So there's the faces of love, which, for example, friend and enemy. Well, these are two faces. And you think a friend is someone who supports you and validates you and protects you and all of that. And at a surface level, your friends are the people that you want or need. But at a more complex level, sometimes a good enemy is the one that helps you grow the most and become the person you need to be. Sometimes a good enemy loves you more in their impact than a friend. Think of, athletes, for example. Like, who would work that hard to beat a world record if the world record was set at if you ran 1 mile in your entire life, you won the world record. Well, okay, so you run the mile, you won the world record. Are you going to necessarily work 6-hour days, 10 hours a day to beat the world record of, 3.47 minutes for a mile? Or it's like, no, it's competition. It's competing to draw out the best in the other that draws that level of excellence. It's why monopolies in business generally offer worse service than competition. It's why the U.S. government breaks up monopolies to foster competition, because the public always benefits when two companies compete. Microsoft was, a lazy bully until Google came along. And then when Google started winning the competition in many ways, they really got their act together in many ways. And then, of course, everyone benefited because, everyone benefits, the public benefits when there's a competition. And if your goal is really to serve, then in that sense, your enemy is a certain kind of ally, particularly a good enemy that competes on terms of merit. An enemy that just goes around shooting people, not so much. They're not helping bring out the best in themselves or you, but the enemy that transcends their own limitations and pushes the envelope can be a bigger ally in becoming your best self than the friend that just says, there, have another cup of tea. You've worked hard enough. I'm sure you don't need to go and make another video, because just have another cookie. Well, that's your friend, but in another way, that's your enemy. There's also the phases of the child, the adolescent, and the adult. And the child loves from a place of attached need. Every 2-year-old cannot survive without adults. And the child has the love of grasping. The infant in particular has the love of needing. I need you. And this is a form of love. It's the foundation of love. I need you. The adolescent is curious and sexual and has more of the face of, I want to see what happens about this, and I want to see about this, and what about this, and what about that, and I want to fuck you. And what happens if I push this like this, and fuck you like this, and fuck you like that? So the adolescent corresponds with lust. And that's a face of love, meaning it brings interest and curiosity to have the adolescent's drive for sex as part of a relationship. And the adult is about service. The adult is the part that, having met their needs, you also have the adolescent, you go from dependence to independence and to union. So you have child, adolescent, adult, attachment, lust, and service, dependence, independence, and co-creation, partnership, union. So that's the domain of the adult. The adolescent needs to rebel. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. I don't want to do that, this, that, the other. The adult is saying, how can I be of service? I don't need to rebel. I have a sense of myself. I don't need you. And so I have a sense of my own center. And I want to be of service, and I want to partner with you to bring out the best in you. So we have the partnering and the union. We have the mature love. The mature love is the one love that is not all about me. I need you. I want you. I enjoy your company. I want to fuck you. And on the other hand, you have the question, how can I be of service? How can I be loving? What is it you need? How can I support you to be at your best? So this is where the mature love comes from, and it's the first love in the cycle that is about the other person. Because if I ask you, how can I support you to be at your best? If I ask you, that's about you. And if you tell me, I can't even answer that question, I'm really busy right now, and I don't need any new friends, and I say, okay, well, take care. I've just been loving to you by withdrawing. My only interest was in seeing how I could benefit you. And you told me, and it was to have nothing to do with me, and that's cool with me. So, done. But the adolescent is like, well, how am I going to have sex with you if I disappear? Because for the adolescent, it's all about the adolescent. For the child, it's all about the child. It's the adult where it's about the other. And it's one of the reasons that I think so highly of Danish people as well as Thai people. When I travel there, it's all about me. But when they travel here, it's all about us. Meaning the Thais and the Danish people already know more about America than Americans know about America in many cases. And they already know more about America than I know about their country in many cases. And they're still more interested in looking outward, in responding, in making time, in hospitality. And this is a symptom of maturity. It's a symptom of growing up. It's a powerful expression of an adult country. Now, there's also, on the darker side, the faces of love, you have violation, where you're violated, moving to violating, and then moving to partner in more conscious ways. So when you engage in an unconscious way, you are going to violate that which you are unconscious of. And you're going to be violating. You're going to be violated. And then when you gain more, that says the child, you will be violated. As the adolescent, you will violate. And as the adult, you will partner to shift the abuse cycle. So in unhealthy families, it goes from violating, to partnering. Now, we already talked about one phase of love being joy in the presence. Let's look at a few of the roles in which love can take place. You have the love of a teacher for the potential of the student. Remember that, a good friend is the one who wants the best for the best part in you. And a good teacher wants the student to do well in the subjects that are most relevant to their well-being. This is, a shakier thing to push. When you're an algebra teacher and you realize that a third of your students aren't getting good jobs and they need to learn sales, and algebra is not going to help with that. And you learn that a third of your students are obese and algebra isn't going to help them with their dieting and their trauma, so you're not going to help it. It becomes harder to look at obvious sources of pain and teach completely erroneous subjects or completely irrelevant subjects. And so a teacher that loves the student, first of all, wants to teach what will be of service to the student in their life, and then wants the student to do well so that the best in that student can flower. You have the parent-child dynamic where The parent will make the child sacred, the potential of the child sacred, by sacrificing expediency for the health and the well-being and the probability field of that child. You have a friend who will nurture as equals the best part of you, and they'll nurture the best part of you, and you'll nurture the best part of them. You have the lover who will bring out the greatest beauty in the other. It's the role of the lover to see the beauty and to bring that beauty out. And you have the love in business, to honor agreements, to honor boundaries, to create abundance. You have the love towards the customer. You have, I really like Elon Musk. He loves his customers, he loves his employees, he loves the planet, he loves the future of humanity. He doesn't love money. That's what he loves. He loves cool, great stuff that makes customers happy. He loves a beautiful future for our humanity. Money is just a means to the end, and he's made that very clear to all of his shareholders, and is one of the reasons he's so inspiring. And of course, you have the betrayal in all of these things. The teacher that sells the student's future out for some political intrigue. The parent who abuses the child to feel better about their own abuse. The friend who betrays the best interest of the friend to do something else. The lover who's more interested in meeting different manipulative agendas than protecting the third energy created by the relationship. Now this brings up, and you also have the leader and the follower. The leader that loves the country, the people, and that will make sacrifices to do what's best. The Thai and the Bhutanese both had recent examples of great kings, deeply loved by the people, because the focus was on the people. And the Bhutanese king actually insisted against the will of the people that they move towards democracy, because he was aware that although he loved his people, all kings will not love their people. And so how do you get rid of a bad king? And how can he protect the country as a good king from future bad kings? There's always corrupt power centers. And we have this interesting dynamic with a loving relationship, which is that it takes two to say yes. If I want to help your kids' high school education or college education, and I say, I'd like to talk with them, I'd like to find a good fit, I'd like to do some talent studies, and I'd like to then pay for a third of the college education. Well, if the teenager says, fuck you, I don't want to hear what you have to say, because he's a teenager, and the parent doesn't care about their teenager, I can't give that gift of love if it's not received. It takes two to say yes. Now, if they want to receive that gift, if there's a single mother who desperately would like a benefactor for their struggling teenager and is looking everywhere to receive that gift to protect her son's future, and no one will give the money, well, you also cannot have that love exchange. The energy can't flow. It takes two to say yes. It takes one to say no. The giver, the receiver, the leader, the follower, the teacher, the student, either one can break off that flow. Now, another aspect or distinction in the domain of love is feminine and masculine love. So, when we think of things like presence and style and environment and tone, these are feminine traits in men and in women. When we think of thought or structure, etc. So think of it in terms of there's the law, and then there's the attitude with which the law is applied. So the law is the masculine expression, but the way that it's applied is the feminine expression within a law officer. So someone can come in condescending and superior and say, well, your house was getting broken in, take better care of your house, I came around, stopped your house from being burglared, but basically be looking at you the entire time like you're a piece of shit and you're not worth their time. Well, that's a masculine, begrudging expression of something positive. You protected my house from burglary, while simultaneously dripping immensely toxic feminine energy all over it. All the emotions and tones and presence are all about superiority and disgust. Well, all the behavior, and you can do the same thing with AIDS. Here's a thing of rice, you starving idiot. Or you can show great respect and not help. And so there's this distinction between masculine love, which is in the form, and feminine love, which is the energy. It's kind of, the physics level, it correlates to that wave particle phenomena. And so every man has a feminine side, every woman has a masculine side. So it's not about men and women, but there are two faces of that love. And there's also within that several octaves of that. And the non-physical is more feminine than the physical. It's more as an energetic level than what's taken form. And on that level, the divine is more feminine than masculine. We're masculine down here, but when we're opening up to a transcendent energy that's beyond our body, we're relating to the disembodied deity, the disembodied divinity. We could say we're the masculine version of divinity to the extent that we connect with that. And what we aspire to, our ideals, are the unformed, flowing forms of divinity, which is the feminine. So in that masculine-feminine polarity between the divine and embodied human beings. And then within, because the masculine-feminine polarity is very complex, and it occurs in subtle and paradoxical ways at every level, because you can say that overall, for example, overall women are more feminine than men, overall human beings are more masculine than the divine, but even within the divine, you have, male embodiments of the deification, male archetypes and female archetypes. And within women and men, you have very feminine men and you have very masculine women. So there's a couple of paradigms that I think relate to what it is to love. We've already talked about joy in the presence and these processes of maturity. But one is a process through the paradigm of mathematics. And there's this interesting dance where what we might call high mathematicians, the Einsteins, the Max Plancks, the great thinkers in mathematics. And there's an interesting dynamic here where currently at low-level mathematics, women are doing better than men in math. But at the very pinnacle of mathematics, it's dominated by men. There's something about the connection between the dissociation from the culture and emotion and high abstraction and the isolation of men that correlates with very high levels of mathematics being done predominantly by men, while like at high school level of mathematics, women are doing better than girls are doing better than boys. But there's this archetypal energy of the outsider. Women are much more closely linked socially than men in our culture. And really esoteric and abstract thinking is not commonplace within the culture. And so one of the phenomena that happens is that a small percentage of the isolated and marginalized men have developed in that isolation an abstract way of relating with reality that leads to, high levels of mathematics. And if you look at this category of mathematics, it's often a synesthetic relationship with a variety of areas. When you look at very high levels of thought, you start feeling the music of ideas. You start seeing the genius of sound. You start feeling the mathematics of emotion, the geometry of the heart, the beauty and the symmetry of certain philosophies. And in lower octave synesthesia, you converge the senses, meaning you have people that, in poetry in particular, you talk about smelling the sounds, tasting the light, opening the doorway to a void of unknown water. When you say unknown water, it's like there's a tension between that. Because first you're saying it's unknown, then you're saying it's water, which stretches the reality to a point, because paradox points to a divergence in perspective. And great divergences in perspective lead to very big views of reality when they're synthesized. When you have two eyes looking at reality, you see depth perception because you see slightly different versions of reality. When you expand the eyes out 100 miles or 1,000 miles, these eyes are seeing completely different worlds, because this eye can't see 1,000 miles from here, and this eye can't see 1,000 miles from here. And when they're both feeding information, your experience of the world becomes vast, because where it's night here, it's day here, where it's cold there, it's warm here, where it's raining there, it's dry here. And you realize how complex reality is, where these little eyes, they pretty much agree on the same version of reality because they're looking in the same direction. They just give a bit of depth perception through their slightly different angle. But perspective, slightly different angle or very big gap in angle perspective, correlates with depth perception. And so when you create paradox, what you're inviting is depth perception and greater dimensionality. And so one form of love is the high mathematics. We already know that symmetrical faces are more attractive to people than non-symmetrical faces. And symmetrical bodies are more attractive than non-symmetrical bodies. And so there's a geometry that's present in our body. There is a geometry that is present in our survival. meaning that if certain mathematical formulas were not in place, the universe would not exist. And we are part of the universe, which means we are part of the equation, which means we're part of the equation, becoming conscious of ourselves as a part of the equation and learning the architecture of the underlying code. And so there's a dance with the underlying energy of who we are. And that code permeates every sound, every touch. And this is where, when you get into high forms of the code, high forms of mathematics, sound does become visible in a certain, through observed and viewed in a certain way. Smell becomes something you can taste in a certain, measured in a certain way, and the sphere, the elegance of the sphere, emerges as a primal formula and phenomena for grace and elegance. And one of the interesting things about a sphere is this phenomena of coming full circle, where you see something going away from you and it keeps going away from you and it comes back. And you can see it in selfishness and selflessness. For example, you're so selfish, you're taking care of yourself. You're even more selfish. First, you took care of your physical body. Then you took care of your finances. You're even more selfish. You took care of your house. You took care of your neighborhood. You're even more selfish. You took care of the town that you were in because you were just so selfish. You wanted to live in this great town. And then suddenly you're the most selfless person there. Because when you care deeply for the self in a shared reality, you benefit every other self in that reality. When you make sure your city is beautiful so you can drive through a beautiful city, you're making sure that everyone else's drive is beautiful as well. And so there's these polarities within the sphere where the problem is not someone being selfless or selfish. If someone is totally selfish, they are selfless. If someone is totally selfless, they are selfish. Because if you really want to do the best for other people, you take care of yourself because it's the place to start. So if you really give a damn for someone else, take care of yourself. And, and you'll take the load off of other people and da-da-da. And so the real problem is not selfishness or selflessness. It's hatred and self-loathing. That is also loathing of everyone else, which is, I'm not going to take care of myself. I'm not going to take care of my body. I'm not going to take care of my mind. I'm not going to take care of this world. I'm not going to take care of anything. I hate it, which is neither selfish or selfless. It is the opposite. It's destroying the self and the other because we're part of one ecology. You have the paradigm of meeting needs, and this is one of the most applicable actions and things that you and I can do. You want to be loving to someone? Understand what they need. Here's what every single human being in the entire history of humankind has needed. First of all, they need to survive. You have a place to sleep. You have warmth. You have shelter. You have protection. Is your body in good shape? Do you need food? Do you need medicine? Do you need to keep clean? Survival. Are your survival needs met? Number one, if they're not, help them meet them. That's being loving, particularly if it's done in a way that's moving from dependence towards independence, which leaves the way to union. But every relationship starts off in a dependent relationship. You can't take a flood victim who's traumatized, just lost their grandmother, and say, feed your own self, go out and get a job in your rags, I guess you're going to die. And no, every relationship has to start somewhere. If someone doesn't have their survival needs met, you want to love them, you participate in meeting those survival needs. Okay. They've got rent, they've got food, Okay. How about security? How secure are they in that? Do they have an extra 1,000 or so in the bank? Are there steps they can take to do that? Are there ways that you can help with that so that they're secure? Because there's a hierarchy of human needs: survival, security in that survival, and then love and belonging. Love and belonging is the third need. Every single human being, even the outcasts, they need to be cool outcasts, whatever they are. The people at the edge, the loners, they need to be, oh, look at that interesting loner. They belong to the circle in the category of a loner. Everyone needs to feel a sense of love and belonging. How are you doing? Do you feel supported? Do you feel cared for? What do you need? Do you have someone to talk to? Can you talk about all your feelings? We look at domains. Well, we'll get it. We'll get to that. But how is your need for love and belonging being met? Mentally, emotionally, physically, sexually. How is that being met? What are those needs? And the child needs it in their way, and the adolescent is not going to be told what to do. The adult is there to be of service. And we can't be an adult to another person until we be an adult to ourselves. Can we love ourselves? Can we love our child who has attachment needs and this and that and the other and desperation? Can we love that child in all of that desperation and need? As soon as we can love that child in all that desperation and need, it's like the little toddler who, if they do studies, and mom will go out to a park and the 2-year-old, the 3-year-old will hide behind the skirts and look out and then come back to the skirts. And, Tony Robbins talks about it in the language of certainty and variety. You need certainty. And as soon as you have certainty, then it gets boring and you want variety. And so it's this regulation process. And when you have a really secure attachment, that's when you can rebel. So one of the damaging things that goes on in abusive households is the little girl, the little boy is attached and says, what do I have to do to not be killed and to be able to survive in this house? And the narcissist lays down all the rules. And in order to move and become an adult, they've got to go into the teenager where they reject that. No, I'm not going to do that. But the narcissist abuser literally threatens their life, psychologically and physically and financially, if they in any way deviate from the abuse template. And so the child cannot move into the healthy adolescent of antithesis. You have sympathy, antipathy. Sympathy is the child. I'll do whatever I need to do to survive in this, whatever it is. You're all giants. I'm an infant. I have to do what I'm told. Antipathy. This whole thing is full of shit. I don't want anything to do with it. That's the adolescent. And synthesis. That's the adult. This bit's okay. This bit not so much. There's a better way of doing this. We can't do this right now, but we can do it next week. This is the adult regulation, the ability and willingness to respond to make things better. That's a loving adult. The ability and the willingness to respond to make things better. Better in what terms? Well, we're just talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Survival, security, love and belonging. If you support someone to make things better in their survival, security, love and belonging, you are being loving, particularly if they're on board with it. If they're saying, get the fuck out of here, and you're saying, no, I'm going to love you, well, it's questionable. But you also have to realize, there's a lot of abused people, and if they don't have a place to sleep and they're giving you the finger, sometimes it can still be loving to say, fine, tell me to fuck off, but I'm not leaving without giving you a sleeping bag. You're going to freeze tonight. Be at least moderately intelligent. Here's the sleeping bag. Take it or leave it. I'm going to leave it here. There's freedom is a much more mature and responsible form of love, mutual freedom and mutual respect and integration between words and objectives. When an adolescent says, I don't need you, and you look around, it's 40 below zero, and they've got nowhere to go, there's not a lot of integrity in that statement. So obviously they're feeling that they want nothing to do with you, but they do actually need you if they're going to live the next 12 hours. And when other people are in child and adolescent, through trauma, through regression, through not being able to grow up in a healthy family system, it is responsible, it is mature to be the nurturing parent, to let the person have the tantrum and still make sure they're not dead in the morning. Because if that person was able and willing to respond, they would have. The fact that they're dying means they're not able and willing to respond. They're not capable of being responsible for a whole host of different complex reasons. Every human being has moved to the best of their ability towards survival, security, love, and belonging. The next is self-esteem, which means two things. It begins on the outside, where people see something good about you. And then this gets internalized. And the culture, for example, spits out different things. If you are an African tribe that measures prestige by the size of the plate in your mouth, then the first step of self-esteem may be, oh, you've got a nice lip for a plate. And every human being, the need for love and belonging is going to grow around that. Oh, good, I can't wait. I'm going to really make them proud. I'm going to have a huge plate in my lip. Well, it's no more sane or insane in the United States. All the data suggests that after you have around $75,000 a year per person, your happiness, your well-being, all that does not go up, going up to $2 billion. It's not like it's not like billionaires are 100, 1,000 times happier than people who have $75,000. And sometimes it's the reverse. So the data says once you've got survival needs, your survival and security, $75,000 a year, switch your attention to things like daily routine, cutting down your commute, having better sleep, having better relationships, growing, meditating, having a gratitude diary. All of these things provide more well-being per minute spent than working harder. But in a culture, see, they have plate measurements. We have work measurements. The busier you are in America, the more important you are. The bigger plate you have in Africa, the more important you are. In another African tribe, if you've cut off your clitoris with a rusty knife and sewn up your pussy, you've got it made. And so every cult has its idiocy. And we, of course, love to, how could they cut off a clitoris? Oh, no, let's just cut off men's penises and call it health benefit, circumcision. Let's do that. We're much more evolved than, So we all have our stupidity. That's, going back to the culture is not your friend. The culture is the status quo that will kill you if it needs to and help you grow if it needs to, and whatever needs to happen to maintain the status quo. Well, the self-esteem usually begins, like for a man, it's getting sex, being popular, looking cool, wearing interesting sneakers, being considered smart and witty, getting a job, working long hours, being important. That's considered high ranking for a guy. Doesn't matter if that kills him or not. That's the ranking system. For a woman, it's another thing. So esteem is often being praised for something. Like for me, when I was, I think it was around 11, 12, I bought my first TV for 10 cents at a British jumble sale. And then I finally sold it for $10. So 10 cents to $10. And of course, even amongst New Age parents, the primary overlay of the capitalist system, that's what got me my first praise. Wow, Dane's going to do good in business. A 5,000% return on investment. Incredible, So adults were discussing this. I learned it's not very interesting to me. Bought a television for 10 cents, used it for a few years, sold it when I was done. Everyone's happy. Next. No, but this was a big event for the adults in this culture. My coloring wasn't a big event. My meditation wasn't a big event. My learning to read mystery novels, no big event. Turning a bit of paper into a bigger bit of paper, huge event. That's how cults signify what's important. That's when you learn what your people value. And self-esteem is often an internalization. So I feel I like myself because I made more money this year than last year. I don't like myself because this. And I remember this sad dynamic with a wonderful lover. She had a lot of sexual abuse, trauma, high stress. She could collapse easily because that's the impact of sexual abuse in this culture. And yet, she'd gotten into her head from the same kind of experiences of watching kids be praised for money and watching this and that and the other, that she wouldn't really be a valuable person unless she was an executive. And we were dating at the time, and we really needed to grow our relationship and show up more. But she couldn't be an executive and travel and work the crazy hours she wanted to work and grow our relationship. And she said, Dane, this is the best relationship in my life for sure. But I really want to prove that I can do it. So she did. I moved on. She wasn't showing up for me. She was showing up for this idea of being an executive. And that was her first priority because she didn't get loved as a child because she was too feminine. The very thing I loved about her was her femininity. And so she went off. Her health collapsed. She eventually lost the job because you can't work without a body. But that proving it to the cult, however dumb, it would have been way smarter for her to have done the exact opposite. It would have been very, very smart for her to eliminate the job entirely, get a part-time, low-stress job, grow our relationship, invest in her psychological well-being, take better care of her dogs. But she would have been low-ranking in the cult. And when you've been shamed a lot by an idiotic cult, then there's this impulse to show that I can do it because it hurts so much to be discarded because you don't get math results or you don't get, And so esteem starts often by internalizing the outer value and making an accomplishment. In a healthy sense of esteem, you develop your own principles. So you start with a child will accept all the values of their parent, the adolescent will reject them all, and the adult will pick and choose the ones that feel right to them. She was still a child because many sexually abused people are regressed. And so they're still trying to win on their parents' values they're too bruised to go through the risky process of antithesis and throwing it all out. And then they don't get to that adult place of saying, wow, I don't care what these other people think. I've read the data, I've looked at this. This is really smart. I'm going to do this and this and this. And so, esteem is whatever it is you've decided the person you want to be. When you are that way, the way you've decided you're going to be, whether it's just copying your parents or getting to that point of finding your own. When you've decided who you want to be and you're being that way, that's when you have esteem. And to help someone meet their needs for esteem, you ask them, who do you want to be? Why is that important to you? What do you like the most about yourself? And you have the humility to understand that's not going to be, if they're an adult, that's not going to be a mirror of the consensus or of the culture. The culture just creates comfort through conformity for a majority. It has nothing to do with the individual, other than it exerts a very strong push. It's a very strong gravitational pull not to get too far outside the culture, because the culture punishes anyone that deviates from the status quo by withdrawing esteem, withdrawing love and belonging, withdrawing security, and withdrawing survival. Because the culture's primary job is to establish a status quo in which people don't have to think or feel about most of reality most of the time, so that they don't get overwhelmed. And any culture will do that. I mean, the people with huge plates in their mouth where every year they stretch their lip out and get a bigger plate. The Americans that are just as idiotic, going from 60 to 80-hour work weeks because the overtime is so important. You see how much money I made now? Pretty soon I'm going to be on one of those lists of wealthy people that have more money than they know what to do with. I don't know, I'll be very important. So, that dynamic, they're not waking up each morning questioning, is that really intelligent? A plate in my mouth? 60 to 80 hours and I'm still not close to my family? I mean, what kind of idiot thought up these things? Because that's an intelligent, objective thinking. The whole point of the cult is that you should never think about these things. You just do what everyone else does and we'll reward you, or we'll traumatize you if you stand out. Like, why are transvestites such a threat? I mean, are people dying by the millions from the swish of men in dresses? Is Eddie Izzard the greatest threat to humankind because he puts on a dress? Of course not. But he makes people think. And men are supposed to wear this and they're not supposed to wear this. And how dare you ruin our monotony, our certainty that this is the way it is and it should be that way. Because here's the joke. There have been 10,000 cultures and 10,000 languages throughout all human history, and every single one has said that they're the right one. They've all said, this is the way to do it. The plate people know that having plates in their cheeks, the clitoris stitchers, the penis choppers, the workaholics, the people that want to stick weird herbs in their mouth and ruin their lungs, the people that want to drink bitter drinks. Why? It's like, what's so that we can wake up and do those jobs we hate doing. It's insane. And they've all thought they were right. Now, statistically speaking, if we're in a dualistic paradigm, only one of them is right, statistically. So there's 9,000, or there have been 10,000 languages, cultures, belief systems, and you're in one of them. What are the odds that it's the right one, that everyone else didn't know what they're talking about, that you can't look back in history and say they were all smarter than me, but that no one's going to look back and say that you're an idiot? I mean, what are the odds? The odds are clear. They're 9,999 to 1. Do you want to take a bet? You'd be better off going off to Vegas and blowing all your money there, because you can't make money betting 9,999 to 1. And every time you automatically do what your cult or culture says, that's your odds. Your 9,999 to 1 odds of doing something that's going to be considered barbaric and highly stupid as soon as you get a little perspective from it. Go ahead, bet. But with objectivity and with maturity, when someone says they want to be an artist, you help them develop art as they understand art, and you will be loving them. You help them talk about the things they don't feel they're integrated around, and you will be loving them. So, being loving is something only an adult can do. And in this paradigm of meeting needs, first of all, you acknowledge that despite the absurdity of our Marlboro Man images, every single human being in history has needs. The needs are the same for every person. Every person is at different thresholds in those needs, emotionally, mentally, and physically. Someone can have $1 million and be terrified and feel insecure. So physically they're secure, emotionally they're terrified. So if you want to be loving to them, you help them work with their fear, the fear that it's going to be all gone. That the millions will be vanished and this and that, the other, and they're an imposter. You help them work with that. Once they feel secure, you've helped them move a step towards their best self. That's being loving for and by an adult. Right after that, you start moving into developing human potential. You're already getting there by 4, self-esteem, being the person you want to be, but developing your gift, developing your talent. Who are you? Who could you become? Where are you at your best? What helps with that? And, are you a Mozart that needs a violin? Are you a writer that needs a little encouragement? Or a writer's support? You develop the gift and the talent, which of course is very self-satisfying, but eventually that moves out, and then you want to help the person you're loving make a difference in the larger environment. And ultimately, you help the person understand the transcendent reality and truths that are beyond culture, beyond their individual ego identity, because that is the most satisfying relationship. That's when we move beyond the human and cultural fixation into our love with the divine, into our love with the high mathematics. To make a difference. When Elon Musk spent $400 million and every single person told him he was an idiot, and they told him he'd fail at SpaceX, and he said, "You're right, I probably will fail. I've got about a 10% chance of succeeding. But I know of nothing more important that I'm excited about than to encourage our species to become interplanetary. So I'll blow it all, if necessary, and consider it well spent. I'm not doing this to make money. I want to reach for something bigger for humanity. That pleases me." Well, to help someone like Elon Musk, you figure out how to reduce the cost of rocket fuel. You figure out how to make a parachute to catch a capsule that's more compact. To help that transcendent vision along, you invest in a company that provides capital, working capital. That's how you help someone working at that level. Or you provide the environment for a transcendent experience, a book, an idea, a video, a meditation, so that you help someone through becoming the best them that they are, naturally reach through the ego into the transcendent area of the brain and give that back to the group, back to the community, because that's the most satisfying cycle. That is the cycle that the community supports the baby grows up secure and healthily, and then eventually that supports the community. That's the cycle of life. So in the paradigm of meeting needs, if someone says, I love you, I want to love you, and they're coming from their adult, you show them how they can help you meet those needs. They say, oh, I don't want to do any of that. I just want to fuck you or do this and that. Well, they're a child or adolescent, so they can't love you. They can meet their, you can give them love if you want. You can give their adolescent love, but they're not yet an adult. And there's very few full adults. We don't raise adults in our culture, which is an obvious oversight. We raise consumers and technically proficient teenagers. We don't raise adults for the most part. There's also the paradigm of sustainability. To be loving from an adult is to see that both people, you and the other, create and generate more value in the relationship than apart. That's another form of love. It's another form of mathematics to ensure that as a result of connecting, both of you produce and create more value for yourself and others than if you didn't connect. And that's also a compelling reason to connect. Now, love is also a cycle, because love is a relationship. Love is a cycle from birth to growth to death and dying. So it's a cycle there. And to love someone is to participate in a way that creates a good healing birth, a positive and dynamic growth cycle, and a good dying process. Another paradigm tying in with sustainability is flow of value. To be loving and to love someone is to cooperate in such a way that more value flows back and forth, that more positive potential and growth is released into the world. You also have domains of love in which you kind of can explore and expand the range, the dimensionality. You have strength and weakness. Because if you go into any large domain, you will be vulnerable. If you go into a giant black room you've never been into, it's very big, there's all kinds of things, it's the unknown, figuratively speaking, you're in a place of weakness. So it takes a very strong and courageous person to go into that domain, and so you have this paradox. You have other areas where you have all the power. And as a healthy relationship grows, both people will have all the power at times. And so there's, and this ties in with beliefs and things like trust. Do you have the kind of relationship where you can be big and you can be small and you can still be loving? You can receive love when you're weak. You can give love when you're strong in the same relationship in different areas. You also have public and private. This is what we do privately. This is what we do publicly as a domain of love. I'm loving in public. I'm abusive in private. Or I'm loving in public and I'm loving in private. Or I'm abusive in public. In American culture, young men often feel that they gain status in the sociopathic ranking system of chauvinism by being discourteous and unemotional to their female partner in public, but then being soft and warm in private. Every man has a feminine and masculine side, but when the culture is rigged towards chauvinism, many men in certain environments will gain rank for pretending not to have needs or not to care about other people's needs. A little odd ranking system, but that's how an abusive culture migrates down into abusive relationships. You have the known and the unknown domains of love. You have the unknown and the known domains of the psyche. And you also have the fact that the psyche is vast, that the majority of the psyche is not expressed in this culture. And in most cultures in human history, the majority of the psyche is not expressed or welcome. In Rumi's terms, it's an uninvited guest. And so at any given moment, particularly if we're feeling insecure and climbing our ability to meet our own, to fit in, to have security and love and belonging, we're going to be in some phase of the socially acceptable public domain of the psyche. For example, I get to be on time and be awarded. I get to be unemotional. I get to be even-toned. I get to dress moderately neatly. I get to think strategically and save money and make money and drive a truck. And that's all very culturally accepted in my role as a contractor, for example. But if, as a contractor, I notice that there's a sensitive child who's really being beaten up a lot because her parents don't understand the sensitivity continuum, if I start showing more interest in the well-being of that child than in the contracting job, that doesn't have congruity with the cultural norms. And so I start losing cultural stature and cultural ranking, even as I honor the person I want to be. And in the extreme, I get fired for not playing my role appropriate for the job description as defined by the cult. And that description is in flux and chaos, and it's usually wrong. Whatever it is, it's usually wrong, but it is still rewarded for being honored and punished for being blockaded. A lot of our laws are not optimal, but they're still punished if they're broken, and people doing more intelligent things outside the law, are not praised. So you have the ego in this little area. When you want to be loving to someone, you're being loving to the conscious mind, which is who they identify with. And so, someone who's feeling insecure is going to lean heavier into the culture. For example, someone that feels that they're unlovable will work harder than anyone else, be the most normal of everyone else, join the clubs, so that no one could possibly say that that's the case. And in some sense, this is engineered as the culture. Particularly manufacturers of absurd items want you to spend 1,000% more for a named brand. And so they'll spend a lot of money in advertising trying to say that you're a shit if you don't have this label. And people who are insecure will really work hard to get that label to protect them from their own fear based on childhood abuse patterns and the fact that parts of who they are don't fit into the narrow slots provided by the cult. So to love this ego is to understand what that ego is trying to cultivate. And this is where it gets tricky, because To be loving, going back to that sleeping bag example, to be loving is to help someone from a mature place meet their needs to survive, meet their needs to feel secure, feel love and belonging, feel self-esteem, develop their talents and abilities, flourish themselves, reach their potential, and then share that in the community and have a transcendent experience, cultivate consciousness that is aware of that which is bigger than human beings. You can look at that mathematically, scientifically, or you can look at it through a religious lens. But the more you are conscious and aware, the more you are aware of how unaware we are. And 99% of all reality is unknown and unknown, which means that there's a lot that is bigger than human beings, including our future selves. And so to pay tribute to that, to honor that in a certain way by moving forwards is a profound, it's the most meaningful experience of being human, is to reach towards that which is more than human. And so that is to be loving. But you have, for example, within the tenets of chauvinism towards the masculine, it's not just towards men, it's chauvinism towards the masculine. You have, for example, in the United States, the belief that if you need something, you are weak, and that if you're weak, you are less valuable, and you're less cool, and you're less attractive, you're less sexy. So, there's a ton of stuff lumped on this. And so everyone's busy trying to pretend that they know things they don't know, that they don't need things that they desperately need, and that they don't want things that they want very much. This is the whole dynamic, having set up the chauvinistic game that anyone who reveals their needs loses rank. People go around saying, hey, you want this? And then the job of everyone else to maintain status is to say, fuck off, I don't need you. But of course they do. And so to love that ego who's more worried about losing cultural rank than they are meeting their own needs, because they need a sense of love and belonging, and it's kind of a, it's a catch-22. Because if they admit how much they need people, then they're going to lose social rank, and they really need social rank, and the only way to get social rank is to pretend that they don't need it. So it's a very convoluted stuff. You talk about the kind of curveballs that crappy cultures throw to their people to ruin many of their lives. This is one of them. So then you have to figure out some way to give that ego support while pretending not to support them, so that they can pretend that they didn't receive any gift from you, so that they don't have to be grateful, because gratitude is weak. And, and there's all this, weird stuff, and it becomes much less sustainable. But at any given moment, we are identifying with a certain domain within the psyche, one. And we are leading with a persona with a variety of agendas, often to fit into some aspect of love and belonging, because love and belonging being uncurated and untaught subjects in a culture that shames people for talking about them. Almost every person has a need for more love and belonging. But they can't talk about it without risking the ability to meet that need. It's a very difficult thing. So we're in a given domain, and there's usually some part of us that we don't want anyone to see because it's low ranking within the cultural hierarchy. And there's some other part that we want people to see because it's high ranking. And then we feel unlovable because we know we're hiding the low ranking thing. But to be loving, one of the things that I like to do is just create microcultures. Say, fuck that culture. I don't care about any of the things they want or anything like that. Let's consciously build up the people we want to be in a mutual reward system where I will reward you and honor you for being that, and you will reward and honor this part in me, and we can grow that part together. So that concludes this exploration of love. There are 400 words for snow in Eskimo language, and that's because the Eskimos care a lot about snow. There's one word for love in English. We have to wonder how much we care about it with all of our lip service. We've touched on a good 20%, and it's been a pleasure. Thanks for watching. I'll see you around.